Hello and welcome to this Zoom broadcast of America United International, or AUI. It is Monday, November 8th. I'm Dr. Zena Crenshaw Logo, and my co-host, Ms. Belinda Parker Brown, is on the scene in Louisiana covering a corruption trial of a sheriff there. Ms. Belinda, come on in and tell us what's going on your end.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Z. I certainly apologize for, I'm in the car right now and there is a lot of excitement here. This is a great day for the parish here in Louisiana, St. Tammany Parish. We have a corrupt sheriff that was in office for over 3 decades that is now on trial for rape, incest, and molestation charges. And the jury is in deliberation. It's been a long day for me. And we are awaiting the jury decision to come down. The judge have given the jury instructions he told him, he warned him, he said, you may have to pack a bag for at least 3 days because it's a lot of material that they're going to have to go through. Over 31 witnesses in this trial. And I'm telling you that in the closing arguments, there was a horrific, just some horrifying things that came out in the trial. It's been a travesty, but most of all, it has been a blatant betrayal of the public's trust. And I'm not going anywhere until the verdict come down. I'm hoping that we do get the verdict tonight. The news media and everybody is here. But most importantly, I want to go forward with this interview, Dr. Z, and I'm pretty sure that Dr. Tate is ready to share her story about, the organized legal abuse when it comes to how bad it really is, especially here in the state of Louisiana. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for checking in with us. This is really exciting. We've got on the ground coverage. So, I feel like a network news anchor, but you're absolutely right. Today, we're going to be interviewing Dr. Monique Tate. She is the head of state for the Coastal Nation of North America, Principal Chiefess Blue Feather. And I'm going to have her pronounce her the official title, so I won't slaughter it, but we look forward to speaking with her in just a few moments. But for now, I want to do a little housekeeping. We usually try to have our live audience here on Zoom with us and live stream to Facebook. But tonight we're going to just simply have our Zoom audience, and we will upload this interview to YouTube and upload it to Facebook a little later. And so everyone will have our usual, network will have an opportunity to partake in this sure to be very informative and explosive interview. Those of you who are here with us on Zoom are encouraged to use our chat section to comment on our presentation today, or if you, if you have questions for Dr. Tate or Ms. Belinda or myself, we want you to, most people right now really know how to use Zoom. And so you're familiar that we have a Q&A section that you should be able to find at the bottom of your screen. That's where we want you to put your questions and use the chat for just what we call the chatting. You can communicate directly with the presenters as well as other audience members. But if you it can refrain from putting your questions in the chat, that way we're less likely to miss it. Dr. Tate has been warned, just like all of AUI's interviewees, that we're going to put her to work through what is called AUI's reverse interview. And let me explain again how that works. We have our guests share their knowledge and impressions of America United International. And that is a way of us getting to know them before we give them a detailed introduction. And, few guests have such an interesting background as Dr. Tate as head of state. So I'm actually going to be less patient with the reverse interview with Dr. Tate than I am Chief Justice Bluefeather than I am usually with guests, because I cannot wait to learn more about her role in government. Let me, well, again, you know, to try to help people understand how this reverse interview works, it's kind of like a quiz show, because, you know, we're asking you, what do you think? What are your impressions? What are your, what's your understanding of AUI? And then it's sort of like this, the Masked Singer, because we sort of obscure details about our guests. In fact, we actually obscure details about our guests until they have come in and talked about our campaign. So, you know, it's like really egotistical. We let you talk about us before we talk about you, but it has worked out really, really wonderful. And then, but it is sort of a, this is your life, because we really want our audience, both our live audience and the people who tune in afterwards through the recorded broadcast, we really want to let them know about our guests and their insights with regard to this whole phenomenon of the ineffectiveness of the U.S. legal system when it comes to challenging certain types of human rights violation. So let me get all of us on the screen. And Miss, you can see Miss Parker Brown is still out there in Louisiana. But let's dive straight into this reverse interview. Dr. Tate, and I'm going to have you share with us the best way for me to refer to you. Is easy to say Dr. Tate. I can say Chief Justice Bluefeather, but help me with giving you the proper presentation and pronunciation, keeping in mind that this old mind can't keep up with much, you know, can't keep up with 2 and 2 as well as I used to. But I want you to share with us how we should best refer to you. And then if you could move into your description of America United International, consistent with our reverse interview, and just simply share with our audience as much detail as you think they need to understand of what the campaign is about. And I'm going to be learning something, because believe me, Dr. Tate is an expert with regard to human rights and systematic violations of human rights under color of law. So get ready to really learn. So much. Thank you, Dr. Tate. Go ahead and please share with our audience how we should best refer to you and your insights with regard to America United International.
Greetings, Halito, Osio, and Mahalo. I'm Dr. Tate, officially known as Chief Justice Sahani Ugidali, which means blue feather. So you just want to call me Dr. Tate or Chief Blue Feather. Either one is fine. We're family here.
Thank you.
I'm very honored to be here today, and thank you so much for inviting us. The opportunity to interface with your organization, our organization now, as we're joining in with you, American United International, it's an honor and it's timely, especially with the work that we do as indigenous human rights advocates in different states across the country. We were introduced to you all by way of an actual kinship client that we're working with in Louisiana, actually. And she introduced me to Ms. Belinda Parker Brown. And from there, I think we had a 3-way conversation, and Dr. Z, you came in on it, and that was it from there. And we just started to share our passions and our frustrations of the things that we're experiencing as advocates, and trying to promote implementation and enforcement of human rights in the United States, and finding that we're all facing the same walls. That where does the accountability come in? So we're looking, as we're honored to come to join with you, and in your coalition of many stakeholders who are facing that same wall. And I think that this is critical and timely in this time, because there is a consensus, I think, in the public eye that human rights is not an issue in the United States. I'm also a part of International Prisoners Conference, where I work with the National Advocacy and Action Team. And it's the same thing when we try to poll people, what is human rights? Is there a document related to human rights? What does human rights really mean? How is it articulated in the United States, and do we have a problem? So there is a disconnect, I believe, with the public with regard to the implementation and enforcement of human rights, if there's an actual human rights issue, because of the drastic censorship and suppression that we have of what is actually happening at the ground level, dealing with the United States legal system. And as you guys coined it perfectly, the weaponization of the United States legal system. And with the work that we're doing, we're seeing it firsthand at the ground level, where the United States legal system is actually used as a weapon against citizens of this country. So we're just happy to be a part of you all and finally have somewhere to go and come to you all with the issues that we're having, because you're taking it to a national and international level and getting some eyes on this and illuminating this issue that needs to be addressed.
I mean, you've introduced so much, and I can't wait to explore it all in detail. You know, we didn't make clear the role of, you've heard us mention Louisiana a few times, and Ms. Parker Brown, as so many of you know, but you know, the people viewing this video may at some point not realize that she is the Chief Executive Officer of Louisiana United International, which is the corporate sponsor of America United International, and I'm the Chief of Operations for AUI, which is a campaign. So I don't know if Ms. Parker Brown wants to elaborate on that, but I think that we needed to get that established for the record. She's usually, you know, in her studio, and it has the background with Louisiana United International, and then I have the background for America United International. So I just want to get that established. But Dr. Tate, you talked about things happening at the ground level with regard to the U.S. legal system, and the lack of knowledge, the lack of awareness among people that you're encountering, even on the international scale, as to what the problems are in the United States, and really the disconnect between the hype, what was the billing for the United States as the beacon in the West, and what actually happens insofar as protection of human rights. So tell us what problems you have encountered. What brings you to America United International, more specifically, being concerned about weaponization of the legal system and the failure of our government to effectively redress that? How did you get to that? Either personally, professionally, either route. Just go ahead and share with our audience and let us know more about you.
Yes, in my role as the principal chiefess of Coosa Nation of North America, USA, we're a free and associated ancestral state. And basically our primary role is nationally is to facilitate safe passage and right of return for American Indians, or we're also known as Indigenous Aboriginal Americans. And what that looks like is it's a broad spectrum of things. We work directly with kinship. Some are members of the nation and some are not, because we believe human rights is human rights. So we don't generally turn down a case that is brought to our Judiciary Council. We do have a Judiciary Council, the Council of Nine, where we take recommendations for cases where they can range from a criminal case, children's cases, land cases, and we basically deliberate in our own council, especially when the person that we're working with, or individual family that we're working with, has hit a wall with regard to their rights being violated within the United States legal system. So we work very actively with individuals and families across the United States. We have a case in Alaska, a defects case in Alaska, a defects case in Georgia. We're working with a civil matter in Louisiana, and we have some land cases that are going on in Tennessee, and now getting ready to move branch into North Carolina. And basically what brought us to this part is what you said, is that when our rights are violated, where do we actually go? We think that we can walk into, the shows Law and Order, which happens to be one of my favorites, because I do like to watch law, and I like to, read law reviews, and I just kind of like the show. But it's a myth and it's an illusion where we think that we can have our day in court. That's something that's embedded in us, from school and just from the images that we have from mainstream media, that there's this magical thing that when we're violated, we can have this day in court. And what we're finding is that's not necessarily true. And in fact, the court system itself is the one that actually impedes people bringing correct action or seeking remedy in those courts. So in one of the most egregious cases that we're dealing with is with the children's cases, where children have been removed unlawfully from our purview and from documentation that has been submitted to our council. Whereas not only is the United States legal system weaponized against us, but it's actual state and federal agencies that actually use the legal system as a weapon against particular underserved individuals and families and communities, as if it is by default, like it's customary, like it's something that we should just accept, that we can go in and remove children off your own property and land without a court order, and then 2 months later create a case out of thin air, which we know is color of law, to criminalize a parent because I guess you just didn't have enough information, or you didn't have enough proof to prove your case. So now we're going to create one. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of creation of cases out of nowhere, or just arbitrarily criminalizing individuals and families that are interfacing with the court system. If, in other words, so that the agency or the court can have its way with you. And that is something very disturbing. So it's not like you can walk into a courtroom, at least the ones that we've walked in, and we can expect that there will be impartial judgment, that we're really going to be able to have our voices heard. A lot of times we're blocked. We have literally been blocked out of a court. When we have individuals and family members who come to our Judiciary Council and bring a case before us, we always will introduce ourselves properly to the court system or the agency that we're working with. We have releases of information. So we go into a really deep fact-finding mission to find out all the, the intricacies of the case before we take a case, because we want to make sure that we're representing, the right side of things as well. So we do all that. We give a notice of intervention because we are a juridical personality. And it pretty much can go smooth sometimes, but until we start to see where you have violated the rights. And one of the things that we're finding that is very perplexing, when you mention human rights, constitutional rights, they look at you like they don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, well, how could you not know what we're talking about? If you all have taken oaths of office to the Constitution and you're supposed to be upholding law, why do you look at us like we're crazy? Or penalize us and we'll start to become hostile toward our involvement because we're pointing out blatant color of law abuse, blatant constitutional violations, blatant human rights violations. And in these cases that we see, particularly in the children's cases, these children in both cases in Alaska and Georgia were taken out of their homes or taken off their own property without any court orders. And as the case progresses, the parents have become criminalized within the system. So the very system that is supposed to help and bring families to capacity winds up using the legal system as a weapon. And it's like they're partnering against these parents. And even if they give the parent a so-called, give them a public defender, that's not much help either, because we have had to question several public defenders about their oath of office and upholding constitutional rights and upholding human rights. They'll admit that things are wrong. They will admit that, yes, their rights have been violated. But when they go on the court, the only thing that they're going to promote is that their client does what the state tells them to do. So it doesn't matter if your rights are violated. You just need to do what the state told you to do. But the state is a public servant. And if your job is to ensure that families are brought to capacity, if there is some problem, because in these cases, we've actually seen there was no crime committed. They may have been an issue somewhere along the line, but it should never have been in a court. in the first place. So it's almost like once they get you into the court, it just becomes a web of deconstruction. And parents, individuals, and families are drowning in this system. Literally, they're bullied in this system, and they don't see a way out. So we come in and we're very outspoken, but in truth, and we don't back down. So we follow what we call Mahawahe. We will walk with you, and we walk with every client, family that we work with from beginning to the end. We also offer healing services as well, and we try to help fill in the holes of other spaces in their lives that may need a therapeutic education, like I said, health and healing services, and getting them connected to professionals that can help. And we just kind of encircle them. We have a circle of clan mothers, and we have a healing circle every Wednesday, and we just kind of gather around and give them a space to express it. And I think that's what's missing as well. Our people don't have a place to cry out. Like, who do we go to? So once we find out that an egregious wrong has been done, where there is definite evidence of judicial misconduct, and you guys are on point with that, where there's maladministration of public service, we go through the proper channels. We will follow the proper channels. We will go and we will file a complaint within the agency. We'll file a complaint with judiciary commissions. We will follow complaints with the Office of Inspector General. We have gone to the FBI. We have gone to the Justice Department. We've gone to the marshals. We've gone to senators. We have contacted. We will contact representatives, and we'll take this thing all the way through and streamline all the way through the federal. And it is always the same answer: we don't have jurisdiction. You need to do this, and you need to do that. And then it actually winds up circling back around where we're told, well, you can always sue them in court. So I discussed that with our Chief of Justice. Why? How dare you tell us that anyone should have to sue for remedy or rights? If rights and remedy is already written in instruments of law, constitutions, international human rights treaty law, why should anyone have to take their own substance? And many of our people, and we know the underserved individuals and families that are targeted by the U.S. legal system, where are they going to get the resources? Where do we get resources? Because it's not always guaranteed that you can actually file a lawsuit for free. So why should we have to sue for that? If we have oversight, and we're supposed to have oversight of courts, we're supposed to have oversight of agencies, because these are public servants. When a public servant does something that violates you, you're supposed to have a way, as you say, a remedy, a place to go. And when you exercise that right, it's like talking to thin air. They'll accept the complaint, but that's pretty much as far as it goes.
Mm-hmm.
That's as far as it goes.
So you have the Kusu Nation and the council. Is it best to characterize it as a human rights enforcement body, or is that too limiting?
No, that's basically a primary role, is to hear the cases. And we've actually, when we've had to do a hearing here in Georgia, we will actually send out notices to attend. So we're not, so that we can't say we're one-sided. We're giving you also a chance, because we can't find a solution within your legal system. So we had to create our own lawful system, at least to give people a chance to get it on the record, so that whenever we are taping our hearings and we're writing up our orders or writing up our findings, at least we can put them in to the records somewhere from our point, from the individual's point of view, with the evidences that sometimes people are never even able to submit into court because they get blocked when they have to put in motions, and the motions get denied, and they don't get to, like in the case of Georgia, when the young sister was trying to use her rights under ADRIP, the judge hushed her. She wouldn't even let her say the word. She wouldn't even let her say the word. And when she wanted to get an emergency hearing, they had a hearing to tell her that you can't have the emergency hearing. So it's like, I mean, there's these systematic things that are put in place to actually block. So yes, our thing is to get constitutional rights and your human rights enforced in these so-called legal bodies, and including the agencies that we're dealing with. So now, yes, I would say that would be a primary.
Okay. And now does the council have exercised original jurisdiction over any matters and make its own determinations with regard to individual liability, guilt, criminal guilt or innocence? Is that a function of the council as well?
Yes, it is. We
Okay.
actually, yes, in the case of Georgia, we found that the state of Georgia and its agents were guilty of crimes of humanity against the
Yeah.
family that we
So,
yes, we do.
yeah,
Absolutely.
but what I'm asking is, does the jurisdiction also include, say, for example, I commit a crime against Miss individually. I'm not a
Okay.
representative of government. I individually commit a crime against Miss Parker Brown. I steal some property of hers. Will you all, will the council adjudicate those type of matters, particularly if we are a part of the indigenous citizenry?
Yes, we will. We're growing towards that, and we're growing as we're going along. And our cases as they come in, we take them as they come in. So we're growing into that role as well. So at least to have a verifiable judiciary body that will address whatever issues that we have that are out that don't fall in line with the great law of peace, or that when there's constitutional rights and human rights that are violated.
Would you mind sharing with our audience history so that we can understand more about the Kusu Nation and its people, and its, whether there's any formal treaty, written treaties between the nation and the United States? And can you give us more of that type of information? We certainly would love to learn. I would.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually submitted in a decree in March of this year, actually, where our great decree basically laying our state of claim, and we've actually cited the United States and all of its political subdivisions and subsidiaries of genocide against the American Negro, pretty much the Aboriginal of America, the copper-colored races of America, Negroes to terror. Kusa, Americus is an ancient empire. It's an umbrella that we walk under to cover all of the different bands and clans, because there's hundreds to almost like a couple thousand of different bands and clans of American Indians in North America. And our role is to cover all of our people so that we will have a national voice as far as our existence. We've been here since time immemorial. The great law of peace is our Constitution and Treaty of Peace. That's what we govern ourselves by. And we have actually submitted this decree internationally to the UN, to the Vatican, and to all of the member states of the OAS. So we've pretty much put the the world on notice. We've actually I guess you can say that we reestablished ourselves, or our council came together several years ago, and with all the heart to decide that it's time to promote our rights as to who we are, so that we're no longer forced into assimilation or forced to be under the forced racial classifications that we've been victimized since, colonial times. So that's what Kusa Nation is about. Kusa itself, I do teach and speak in the mother tongue. Kusa itself actually transliterates into the principle of turtle, that we lovingly call our land Turtle Island. Kusa, ku means to cut, and sa means revelation. So America, Turtle Island is the first to cut through and to be revealed. So we're actually we're an ancient people. And the government knows this about us. I mean, there's enough documentation in antiquity to show who the people were prior to Columbus, prior to the doctrine of discovery. We are just the people of we've been here since time immemorial. So it's time for us to be able to walk as who we are. And that is the crux of our work, is to facilitate the safe passage and return for our brothers and sisters who choose to return to our indigenous pathways, which is why we've facilitated our own education, our own health system, and working on developing the different departments within our own governance and asserting ourselves in the dialogue and the conversation, being that, the United States does not speak for us, and the United States doesn't protect us. In fact, we're harmed. So we have to stand up and protect ourselves. So that's what myself and my wonderful brothers and sisters on our council have decided to do. We've been together for a few years now, and we're still going strong. We've been through trauma. We've been through a lot of changes, but we have always maintained the course of one thing, and that is one people, one mission, one fire. And our heart is to help our people. All of our services are free. We don't charge for anything. And we assist as we're needed. And I think that this is just an opportune time to now come together in coalition with other like minds who want to see our existence here be better than what it is, so that we can live in a more humane society. Because what is really stopping us from living in a humane society, right? Like, why can't we do that? Why can't we have love? Why can't we have safety, housing security? We're also are engaging federal agencies to live up to your obligation to us as Indigenous people. From under UN, the UN Decolonization Act of 1960, Resolution 1514. All of these laws and things are on the books, but they're not being followed through. They're not being implemented. They're not being enforced. So I think that is the core of what we are doing at Coosa Nation, is that for once and for all, under the guise of the great law of peace, is to bring out these idiosyncrasies, this egregiousness, and once and for all, face it. So I think that joining with you all as ambassadors with AUI is right on point, right in time, and in step with where we need to go as a country and where the world needs to go, because we need to make some decisions. How long are we going to continue in a pathway of hating certain people because of, or thinking that it's okay that certain people can stay underserved communities? We had a meeting with HUD this past weekend, and we said, why is it all this money is always allegedly available? All these programs are allegedly available, but why are we still dealing with the same statistical data when it comes to what individuals and families and communities are consistently underserved and harmed and disenfranchised? Because we haven't dealt with the darkness of why we're here today, dealing with a legal system that is weaponized against its own people. Like, what government does that? A true government would never do that. So maybe you're not a government. Maybe you're invalid. I don't know, because you're on this land and you're doing things to the people who pay into a system that abuses them. So that's who Coosa Nation is.
And you really highlight certain strengths about America United International, and perhaps reveal some weaknesses about our existence as a concept, because the distinguishable group that comprises America United International are people who, it's really all American citizens who are impacted by this unchecked corruption of the legal system, and the fact that there's not a fair and impartial administration of justice. How could they be if our legal system can be selectively enforced? And that's what we were able to do with the United Nations, because the US has this gold standard of a legal system, the gold standard for a fair and impartial administration of justice. And what we were able to do is identify in objective terms why, these gaps, these holes that have been honed in our legal system that allow it to be selectively enforced. So it is a wonderful legal system, to the extent that you can get it, to manifest, to be applied in your circumstances, because it can be selectively enforced. It can be withheld against unfavored, disfavored populations, which, tend to be vulnerable people. And being vulnerable in the United States has gone beyond the historically oppressed people of color, people who of modest means, and it has basically become anyone who is the target, whose life, liberty, or property is coveted by more powerful people and forces. So the fact that our population, the constituents of America United International is so broad and so diverse that on one day we're having, medical doctors come in and talk about how they've been targeted and had their lives turned upside down and derailed. And the next day we're having a conversation about mass incarceration and the targeting of young males of color and urban communities and people of modest means. Do you see that as a something that will eventually weaken us, or what do you see? The fact that we cast our net so widely when we say anyone who's been subjected to deliberate violation of their rights through and it's imposed through abuse of the U.S. legal system. If that makes any sense.
No, I think it's appropriate because truth is truth. Through controlled media, we're always given the face of social situations and conditions, right? But it's also a way to suppress and hide the whole full picture. Now, the United States is the #1 incarcerator on the planet. That didn't happen by happenstance, and it didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, it's going to happen. No, this is systematic. Obviously, there's a system in place that helps the United States government maintain its position of being the #1 incarcerator on the planet, outranking every country in the world in imprisoning people or people that are under custodial, under judicial custodial care. So that's the question we need to be asking, and that hits families of all walks of life, right?
Yes.
All ethnicities are really touched by that. We can't just hold that and say, we do know that there, of course, are disproportionate population. Yeah. But if we're going to be honest in our own dialogue, it touches every family, right? Of different backgrounds, different economic backgrounds, different racial and ethnic backgrounds. So that's why the question has to be brought. I think you all are embracing the movement of bringing and illuminating the issue of human rights in the right dialogue, because we need to tell the truth and show how widespread the weaponization of the United States legal system really is, and how it can touch anyone. And I think that people are finding that out now. Sometimes people have gotten comfortable that it's okay if it's the person over there. Oh, it's that community. We've been told the reason why that community is targeted is because they deserve it somehow, right? They haven't pulled up their bootstraps, or they're erroneously they're descendants of slaves, or they come from poverty or generational. There's always this reason, and until it touches you, you realize, whoa, wait a minute. And I think that's what's happening in America right now, is that different groups of all walks of life are waking up to the fact that it isn't just the people over there. It isn't just the group that we're so used to seeing that is, put out in the forefront when it comes to dealing with the disproportionate legal system that we're dealing with. So I think that's good. I think that you all are correct in broadening the scope and bringing in everyone who's been affected by this. And I think a lot of people don't even really understand, because of everything going on with the pandemic and everything, how censored information is, and how many doctors have been affected by losing licenses, being criminalized, and having their own rights violated when all they're doing is trying to live up to the oath that they took to be honest with their constituents and their clients. So we need to know how far spread this is.
Oh my goodness. Oh, you made me want to shout. The people who are watching this video, even if you see the recorded version of it, I hope they put into their comments, those of you all have had this awakening who didn't realize, that the dynamics that Dr. Tate, Chiefess Blue Feathers are talking about, because I've had so many people who have shared with me that they didn't realize, you know, they were living their life, they were figuring that, you know, if you got charged with a crime, you must have done something wrong, and you know, that was the, you know, that community were dealing with these issues because of some shortcoming on the part of those people. And so if what you're saying is resonating with them, even in our Zoom audience, I encourage you to go ahead and post your comment, maybe even tell us about what opened your eyes, because you know, you're absolutely you know, speaking truth. I was about to answer a question along that line. Maybe it'll come back to me, but we have Pattern America United International on the Declaration of Independence. And basically, we have declared that the US government is not, is an undue impediment to life, liberty, and property. When you're the direct target of what you believe and what seems to be deliberate violations of your rights, using the court system as the tool to get it done with the complicity of presiding judges. So what do you think about that? Did you you know, was it apparent why we were referencing that particular instrument?
Yes, I think that one thing we've shared in our council, just looking at where we're headed, you know, where all this is headed, even from a spiritual aspect, it's kind of like we have to go back, step back in order to be able to go forward, because we have gotten so far away from great law of peace, from the Constitution, from the Declaration of Independence. We've gotten away just from the fundamental writings of coexistence of people, where just your right to live is under assault. I mean, it's incredible where we are in 2021 and how fast that changed from last year even to this year. And so much criminal, we're finding that there's been a whole lot of criminal activity and weaponization of the legal system between last year and this year. It's almost like, you know, shutting things down, or the appearance of some things being shut down, is almost a way to just sneakily just usurp rights all around. It wasn't just telling people to sit inside the house or trying to force vaccinations or wearing the mask. It was taking children during COVID and shutting it down and not allowing parents to come into court. Like, we have a gentleman in Alaska, he hasn't had a court date since April. And there's in some of these, a lot of these government agencies and courts are still using COVID as an excuse. How is COVID is an excuse? You're still harming people. You're still arresting people. You're still taking rights of people. So how can you keep using something as an excuse? It's almost diabolical that you're using something that it should have been a health situation allegedly around the world, but actually using it kind of put the nail in the coffin of just closing the doors to constitutional rights, closing the doors to the Declaration of Independence, closing the doors to the great law of peace, where you're just basically shutting down humanity. And now public servants are now telling people, you're going to do what we say, but you've been voted in or paid in. People have paid their, what does all that mean? And that's where I think the revolution, why it's exploding in so many different sections of our society, among doctors and attorneys and the lay person and the victims. Everybody's coming together and saying, hold up, wait a minute, where are you guys trying to take this?
Let me ask you and Miss Belinda if she can chime in. You know, what the point I was thinking about is a retired professor emeritus out of Ohio, David Barnheiser. And I'm sure it's been said before, but it struck me. I first got introduced to this concept reading about his work. And he said, you know, we need to stop thinking of our courts as conflict resolution, where we go for conflict resolution, and start perceiving them as power distribution centers. So I thought that was, you know, very appropriate and you know, a very insightful observation. Now, I started practicing law in the mid 80s. I mean, there's always been corruption. There's always been miscarriages of justice. However, I was a lawyer just for that last little time where judges would simply not just sign anything, you know.
Right.
It was to me just more integrity associated with what a judge would be willing, a U.S. judge would be willing to affix his signature to. And my theory, and so I want to, and this might be too abstract and we may have to move on, but my theory is that as the economy tanked because of corruption and misuse of wealth, and the whole savings banks and the bank, all the industry collapse, that's when the legal system became really the go-to place for accumulating and protecting power and wealth. So, what do you think? Does that strike you? Does that resonate with you at all? That the courts have always been a power distribution center, and this misuse of the court becoming so palpable, so blatant that everybody is seeing it and rising up at this point against it. Do you think it has anything to do with the pie getting smaller, and so the method to keep your share of the pie becoming more brutal?
Yes, it's a business. Unfortunately, we think it's a part of a government, but the government in its capacity as to how it renders law, which has really transferred into more of a legal tool, runs more like a company, a corporation. So they want to protect their dividends and their profits. Mass incarceration is profitable. Poverty is profitable. Gentrification is profitable. Taking children away from their human trafficking is profitable. So when we kind of go back into history of the court system itself, how it started, keeping in mind that this current system was usurped or placed on top of what was here indigenously with the Aboriginal people, with our ancestors, it's a big difference from our council circle fires and our method of accountability, of leadership. Because one thing the Great Law of Peace points out very clearly in the wampum is the role of leadership. And leaders are not, which is a stark opposite, even though the United States Constitution is based off of the Great Law of Peace. They draw from it very deeply and profoundly, except they've cut out the parts of the woman, and they've cut out the parts of the family and the equality of people's rights. That is really actually have been cut out. So when you look at it from that perspective, there's one thing written on paper, and then there's actually what happens when you walk into that courtroom. And then there's a gap between what actually happens in a living courtroom when you're interfacing whatever type of case it is to what's actually written in law. Because legal and law don't mean the same thing. Legal is one thing, but lawful, this is what we don't see, is how lawfulness is not happening in the courts. Mm-hmm. Legal codes are. And I think you remember I shared that Vienna Convention 27, where you're not even supposed to invoke internal laws to usurp treaties. Exactly. Treaty law is supposed to be the law of the land, but it never is. People think of the Indian treaties as the only treaties, not just those treaties, it's treaties, period, that have been signed in some kind of way. What is a treaty? It's supposed to be bringing us together, a treaty. Yeah. And even that's a inflection in our mother tongue. It is trying to bring us to a place of peace, right? Where we can coexist together. But that doesn't happen when you're in the courtroom. What we're seeing is legalese, legal code, like you said, that is weaponized to keep the train going, the commerciality of it going.
And Dr. Tate, you talked about that it's about business, but in my perspective, it's also about bullying. Because yes. I was a civil trial attorney, and I represented the plaintiffs, the injured parties, and I usually was up against companies that were their defense was being provided through the insurance company. They were dealing with insured risks. And so, you know, you have these defense attorneys that are really being paid and largely orchestrated by these mega insurance companies, multi-billion-dollar insurance companies. And the process used to be that you gather your facts, you gather your law, you you make liability clear, and then it became a business decision as to negotiated resolution of the case. You look at, you know, your potential financial exposure if you go to trial, and versus what you could pay to resolve the case through a negotiated resolution. And you weigh the risk of losing, because there's always a risk of losing. And then the two sides would come to a decision and as to a fair amount to pay to eliminate for both sides, risk for both sides, okay? Right. What I have found is that with this weaponization of the legal system, a lot of times we're talking about cases that have almost no value. You know, I've seen, you know, people, the legal system go to war almost trying to ruin someone because they were standing up for their rights in a case that maybe had no financial value or could have been resolved for $30,000, $50,000, you know, and instead they try to not try, they actually have ruined people's lives.
Yeah.
I mean, change the dynamic of their families for generations to come, just because, you know, just to show you who's the boss.
Right.
So it's got to be very much about bullying. It's not even a financial consideration. You know, they will, the system seems now that they will, I never would have thought that the American judiciary would go so far in implicating itself insofar as deliberate rights violations, criminal conduct, basically just to show people like me, you, and Miss Belinda who's in charge, and we better get out of here questioning them. That's more than financial interest. Can you comment on that, Miss Belinda? Do you want to?
Absolutely, Dr. Z. You know, this is a really, really good interview. You guys are hitting on some really hot topics of discussion in regards to how bad the system really is. And, you know, I like the fact that you know, it have so many dimensions to it, but most of you say that, you know, the bullying,
drunk with power.
Yeah.
Right, drunk with power, you know, sick on power. I mean, to the point where, you know, that they would ruin a person's life just to prove that they are the bullies, you know. So, you know, these are the devastating things when we actually can, you know, see through how people, families, and things are being destroyed from the activist point of view. You know, we're standing on looking in, and we're like, you know, what in the world, you know, who do these people think that they are? But then when they rig the system in such a way, we don't have nowhere else to turn. You know, when we know that the judge is in on it, when we know that the prosecutor is in on it, the lawyer, the law enforcement, you know, the sheriff, the police, you know, the clerk of courts. You know, we have even caught the clerk of court.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Relating documents, you know, dates and information on documents, just so that they can say that they are the ones that, you know, are the bullies. You know, get out of here. We're not hearing nothing you all have to say. You know, this is not no pursuit for justice. You know, it's just us.
Exactly. And then you have the American people afraid to say anything about it. But on the other hand, you know, talking about we have rights and this is a free country. I mean, which is it?
Yes, because in the cases, in fact, something you just said sparked memory of the type of things that we endure in the cases where you can know that everyone's in on it, right? From that standpoint. So the young man, the case that we're working in Alaska to have this, our brother's children returned to him. So he went pro se, and he's actually very learned in the law. So he pretty much can really handle himself. So then the thing is, okay, we want you to take a psych. So that's the thing also, that's another form of abuse that the legal system is using to force people that come into their courtroom speaking law, as you said, speaking constitutional law, speaking human rights law, as it is some foreign language, even though you all took an oath to your own state constitution. We don't even really have to go far. Let's just talk about your state constitution and the United States Constitution. Let's just stick with that. And you have to take a psychological. Yes. Because something must be wrong with you to be able to speak this.
And so also, if you're in there challenging us, something must be wrong with you.
Something, and then when the psychologist report comes back and it doesn't fit your narrative, so now we go into the bullying tactics. So he was pro se, and we rightfully put in our notice of intervention, and we posed constitutional questions under perjury of penalty of perjury. So what the state of Alaska decided to do was to shut down the court case altogether by the judge putting this man's records in his chambers, where he can't even access his file. He was told by a public defender that they forced on him that he said he did not want or need, and he does have the psychological capacity to handle his own. He wants to work with his indigenous advocates, that we got this, we can really handle this case. And they have his records locked down. And the other part of it is that when we tried to move into the Supreme Court said, well, we don't have an order. We can't get the order because we can't get the file. So literally blocking access to the courts, period. The young lady's case that we're working with, the sister here that hasn't been with two of her children for 3 years. 3 years. We managed to work to help to get one back, but there's two that are still out there that we're still working to get back. Well, like you said, she put in an appeal of her case. It took over 120 days for it to make it. Where's the case? And then they didn't even release all of her audio. They did not release all the transcript. So they don't like they don't like it when you know what you're doing. They become like, I guess, legally violent towards you. Where if you're a pro se and you have advocates and they know what you're doing, then that's where we see a lot of the actual bullying, and you can tell the collusion between the courts, the clerk, the attorney generals. I mean, this thing goes high, way up. It's not, it's very broad, and that's how they're able to consistently keep this campaign of bullying and abuse against people, because they know no one's going to do anything about it. If the judge, if the governor agrees, the attorney general agrees, the clerk is in on it. So then where does the accountability come from? There isn't.
That's an interesting concept, that they become legally violent with you all, with people. Let me do our commercials, and then so you and Miss Belinda can have the last words. What I want everyone is to please go to www.americaunitedinternational.net to learn more about the campaign. Join our efforts and donate so we can sustain this work. Even small contributions go far when many people contribute. AUI, America United International, is you, Y-O-U. It's our solution, and it's our job to sustain this campaign. None of us cause organized abuse of the U.S. legal system, but working together, we certainly can solve that problem. In the meantime, we want you to be safe and keep the faith, but we're going to have Dr. Tate come in, and we got a last minute and 2 minutes in the program between her and Miss Belinda. If you all can close us out for the evening. Dr. Tate.
Well, I'm not on mute, but thank you. This was a very vibrant conversation, and I hope we will continue this conversation and move toward the action steps that you all have set as your goals and objectives, and how we can also assist in that. And that, we want to bring the opportunity. Thank you for having the platform and the opportunity to actually bring these cases forward, and so that we know we're not alone, that this is systematic. We know that, and all the different states that we work in, we can verifiably say that, yes, there is a weaponization of the United States legal system. And, you know, we smile now, you know, just to keep, you know, to keep ourselves balanced, but it's sad. It's awful. It's egregious. It's ugly. It's vile. We have a case that's at the OAS that actually at the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights that actually made it to the admissibility stage. The United States gave an answer, and it was a repulsive answer. And it's one of the things that I'm noticing with the United States legal system, when they are called on the carpet, they start to go into, well, that's not binding. We didn't sign that, or that's not ratified, or we're not that, or we're not this. But there is enough laws and instruments that are on the books that this system should not be carrying on the way it is.
Exactly.
So how can we close the gap of what's actually written as far as the principles of how we dispense law? How do we become lawful as opposed to legal?
Exactly. Ms. Melinda, you got an answer for that in the last minute? Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. There you go.
Absolutely, and I'm hoping that I can do it within 1 minute. I want to thank Dr. Tate for this fantastic interview. I mean, you know, she can definitely be an expert, and I'm so happy that the nation signed up to be an ambassador for AUI's campaign, because AUI have made the request that the president of the United States of America be investigated by the international criminal courts for crimes against humanity. You know, when we don't have nowhere else to turn, when our own citizens are being beat up by our government, we cannot stand silently. And this is what he have done. He have blatantly disregarded us. He's silent. And when you swear to an oath, I don't care who you are, to protect and serve your people, and you know that this is happening to us, and we don't have no adequate redress, nowhere to turn, when we got, you know, all of this collusion and these conspiracies, and the governor, from the governor's office on down, you name some of them, Dr. Tate. And I'm telling you, we can go all the way up to the highest court in the land.
Absolutely.
Supreme Court, and these people would tell us, get out of our face, because the fix is in and nobody is going to do anything about it. So that's the reason why AUI is on the scene, and we're saying that this is a code blue, that we are declaring our rights to self-defense by changing the terms of this corrupt government that's saying they're not going to hear us. But at the end of the day, this is our fight. We have to take our position, take a stand, and let our voices be heard as a people. And that's the reason why we're saying we want some federal emergency management of FEMA. We're just using those terms. But what we're saying, when we need somewhere to go to take our cases when these type of atrocities and this tyranny is taking place against our own people. So it has to stop. We will not tolerate it. So I want everyone at the sound of our voices to get involved with AUI. Thank you so much, Dr. Z. This has been a tremendous and a phenomenal interview. And this is the type of information that the whole world needs to know. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.